to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace, and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. So today is Thankful, Thoughtful Thursday, and I'm jumping right in because I can't wait to tell you what I'm thankful for today. I am thankful for old friends and new discoveries. So have you ever been thinking about somebody and wondering how they're doing, and then all of a sudden you get a message or a call from them? Well, that happened to me today. And as well as, finding out what I was wondering, it always makes me feel like we're more connected than we think we are. And then the other thing was I love cinnamon tea, but for some reason I haven't been drinking it lately. So today it was kind of cold and foggy and rainy, so I got a cup of cinnamon tea, and I rediscovered that I just really love cinnamon tea. So if this is your first time listening, I'm Kate Olson, and as well as your host, I'm a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, Reiki master, and a life coach. And I like to call myself a change adventure navigator because I love helping to guide people through adversities and obstacles to find their path, purpose, and peace. And of course, to help them find their passions and their purpose in life. And I am really excited about our show today. It's called Being in Alignment to Avoid Burnout and More. And my guest is Dr. Faith Brown. And I met Dr. Brown in 2016 when I went to the Personal Development Symposium, and that was held at the Harvard Faculty Club. And Faith was one of the other speakers there, and she was actually sitting at my table, so I had the privilege of getting to talk to her for several days during the little breaks that we would get, and I got to know her a little bit. And although I haven't talked to her in quite a while, I'm really happy to have her on the show today. She's a counseling psychologist, a performance strategist, a business mentor, author, speaker, professor, radio personality, and an expert panelist, coaching both individuals and corporate entities on moving to the next level. She specializes in relationships, and she leverages her knowledge in neuropsychology and behaviorism with more than 25 years in the corporate sector to facilitate personal and professional development. She believes that every relationship embodies an element of psychology. Integral to that is understanding the oneness of self. The vertical relationship, mind, body, and spirit, is key to success for all relationships. Dr. Brown's seminal research and publications on mental health of oncologists led to the founding of the Brown Wellness Group in New York City and to the production of the book entitled Burnout, the Gift. She has lectured extensively on the health and resiliency of physicians, the power and brilliance of women, intergenerational, excuse me, I knew I was going to have trouble with that word, intergenerational diversity, and the art of collaboration in the workplace, as well as the impact of social media on or for helping professionals. She's received numerous awards from the healthcare industry and seeks to show others how to manifest love and rewards in their own lives. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Brown now. And is there anything that we missed in your biography?
No, absolutely not. Hello, Kate. It's so good to be with you. It's so good to see you. And let me just tell you, cheers. I saw your cinnamon tea. I have my rose hip and hibiscus, so I'm thankful. So cheers to you and this discussion we're about to have. This is great.
Yes. I'm excited about it. Do you know that you were probably part of what led me to doing my radio show?
No, I didn't know that.
Because at the time when we met at Harvard, I had the email in the email that made me think of it in the first place, in my email folder that said, have you ever thought of doing a radio show? And of course I never had, so I just kind of put it there and left it.
Yes.
And then right after our symposium, that's when you started your radio show.
Wow, yes, yes.
And, you know, I thought, well, you know, she can do it. Maybe I should think about it.
Yes.
And it took a while more after that, a whole year, but yeah, I think you were part of that.
Well, thank you for letting me in on that. It's so humbling, and I'm thankful because we need your voice. The world needs your voice. So we're so glad that you're here. And the great thing about your platform is that I think people are hearing you around the world because they can log in from anywhere around the world. So instead of just helping just folks here in the U.S. and we really need your help, you're able to uplift folks from around the world. So that's the beauty of this whole thing. So yeah, I'm so glad you decided to do this.
Yes. And so what motivated you first to write your book, Burnout, the Gift? What was behind that?
Wow, Kate. So what motivated me to write it was because I didn't think that I was the only one who'd been through it. So my journey through burnout, having gotten through on the other end, and then talking to so many people who was either currently experiencing it, just currently in the throes of burnout, or those who also managed to get through it. You know, I didn't recognize how common it was until I started doing some of the research on it. Do you know that corporate America spends close to $70 billion? That's B as in boy, $1 billion a year on both direct and indirect costs associated with burnout. And the healthcare sector spends about $69 billion. I mean, the numbers are just stifling. So you ask, what in the world is going on, right? What is going on? And surely I experienced this before, like around early in my career. This is a second career for me. So earlier in my corporate career, I experienced this, and I knew I had to do something about it. However, pivoting, having come out on the other side, and now being in service to physicians, being in service to investment bankers and lawyers, you get to see that this thing, I wasn't in a bubble. This thing is systemic, throughout our culture. So I thought it was important to write about it, to if there was any value in sharing my story, such that folks could not only learn about it as a legitimate diagnosis, if you will, but also to know that there is hope, that they can come out on the other side intact. And there are a number of ways of doing that. And I'm sure we'll explore those. But I think just knowing that this thing is so rampant, right, that we need to talk more about it and how to get through it, actually encouraged and inspired me to write the little book, the little guide. And it was a gift, discovering, because of what I learned through my journey. I discovered, like most things in life, those things that we think are obstacles on our course are actually gifts to us. They're actually trying to send us a message. And so I aptly entitled the book Burnout, The Gift.
So what leads to burnout, and then what and who does it affect?
Yeah. So what leads to it? It could be a consequence of a number of things, right? But most of the time, despite whatever the initial catalyst is, it is that forces us to feel out of control. So whatever the catalyst, initial catalyst can be, it could be, i.e., in, let's say, the hospital setting, that one has succumbed to a number of technical pressures, right? Processes that one has no control over, but there are deadlines pending and it's a fast-paced environment. So keeping up is important because one lacks control over the process, over the timing, over the frequency. That can spin one out of control. So the lack of control is primarily the catalyst. Because as human beings, we kind of want to be in control of the next thing, even if we're not. We like to think that we are, that we're in control of the next moment. So when we sense we're spiraling, that there is, we have no voice, we have no standing around as it relates to what's happening to us, oftentimes that could be the catalyst for spinning us into burnout. And who does it happen to? It can happen to anyone. According to the World Health Organization, they've recently defined it. Right? We've known it to be a phenomenon for a very long time, but it's not fully recognized, and nothing is fully recognized unless it has a diagnosis code. So the World Health Organization decided to define it for us and to finally give us a diagnosis code so that we could then truly diagnose it. But we in the healthcare community, we've known about this for a very long time. According to the World Health Organization, though, they've isolated it to the workplace, okay, that this is something that happens in the workplace. What we know for sure is that burnout is something, while it may predominantly happen in the workplace, we see consequences of it everywhere we go because we port the whole of us everywhere we go. So it affects our families, it affects our friends, every environment that we're in. There is some ricochet effect from what's going on with us. So I think in your introducing me to your wonderful audience, we talked about relationships, and you mentioned relationships. And so the most important relationship is the one that we have with ourselves. So since we port the whole of who we are from the workplace to home, and from home back to the workplace, one always affects the other. So it can happen to anyone.
Yes, I think from working with clients, I think sometimes getting to that burnout place can come from having a toxic environment, either in the workplace or at home.
Yes.
Because that's that extra stress.
Absolutely. And see, toxicity is a part of it, right? So toxicity is one way that we look at this, or through one lens. But let's say that we have a caregiver, right, who's in a home caring for either a child or a parent. While that can be taxing, it can lack toxicity. It doesn't mean it's, and it's different from compassion fatigue. It's a totally different thing as well. So toxicity, we can have a toxic environment that certainly will be the catalyst for burnout, but we can also have one that's non-toxic, just monotonous, that we lack control to change anything in it, or perceived a lack of power to change. That kind of spins us into burnout.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be aligned, or what do you mean by being aligned?
Yeah, what I mean is all of us walk around, we embody a mind, a body, and the whole of us is a spirit, right? So there are times when we wake up and we know that we're feeling good, right? We know that it's, at least starting out, we're going to have a good day. And we call that proper mind-body alignment. We act with intention. We wake up feeling good. Our body feels good. Our mind is healthy. We're thinking positively about the day. And our spirit is positive. However, when we are misaligned, when the mind, body, or spirit is misaligned, there is a disconnect either between the mind and the body and the spirit, or the spirit and the mind. There's a disconnect. Something is off. We're not feeling good in our body, so that's disjointed. Or we're having unhealthy thoughts. So our mind is misaligned, and one always follows the other. One always follows the other. So this alignment, once we begin to feel a little off, we should always pay attention to that sign. We shouldn't just dismiss it like, I just have to plow through it, or it'll get better. It will get better, but it gets better with intention. It doesn't get better with dismissal.
Yeah.
So we have to pay attention to the alignment. Is my mind aligned with my body? Is my body aligned with my spirit? Even if we want to change something, we should be positive about that change process, as opposed to, it's not going to get better. I'm going to engage this change process and nothing is going to happen, right? So then we have incongruency. We need there to be congruence in with our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. And that's the vertical relationship.
So how important is personal alignment to the relationships that we have? What effect does that have?
Yeah, so when we have proper mind, body, spirit alignment, that means that we're very familiar with who we are and what we're doing, what we're trying to create, and comfortable in our own individuality. However, when we lack that knowledge, then we port the whole of that into relationships with others too. So this vertical relationship, when this vertical relationship is aligned, then we then have the emotional, mental, and physical capacity to connect in a very fluid and healthy way with others around us. When we are not aligned, then everything around us becomes disjointed. Because again, we don't just port the physical part of us into every environment. We port the whole of us, which includes our spirits and our minds. Babies are really such innocent little messengers to us. You've seen babies as well as animals will often recoil or take to very easily to a stranger, right? Their little spirits will pick up on things that we do not. And that kind of intuitive feeling is something that is truth. It is a part of our truth. We all embody it. So that needs to be healthy. We need to be in tune with who we are, because that alone will make or break these horizontal relationships. So we've got to know who we are in that sense, what's good for us, what's not, by aligning our mind, our bodies, and our spirits.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. So it can either be healthy or it can be toxic. We get to control which.
Yes. And being aware of it.
Yes.
That's, I've seen a lot where somebody doesn't know why people are reacting to them in a certain way. And it's, it has to do with what kind of energy is going on with them. Yes. And we're responsible for that energy, right? It takes awareness for us to even get there. We have to be aware, and that speaks to intention. We have to be aware at all times of the energy which we surround ourselves with, and that we port out into the world. Yes. So can you talk a little about what you mean? You kind of just explained this about the vertical and horizontal relationships, but you didn't really define what do you mean by vertical and horizontal relationships.
So the vertical is the one that we have with ourselves. It is that we have with our higher power. So mind, body, and spirit is simply that. That's a vertical. That's alignment. The horizontal is the relationship we have with everyone else.
Okay.
So across the spectrum, those are horizontal relationships. But this one, the mind, body, and spirit, is the one that I have with myself. And that's the most important one. If this one is unhealthy, I will have unhealthy relationships with the horizontal that presents itself around me.
Yes.
So one is integral. The success is one is integral to the success of the others. Yes, if I don't have a healthy one with myself, I am not going to have a healthy one with anyone around me.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship between alignment and burnout? Why is that important?
Oh, yeah. So burnout, as I mentioned to you, oftentimes the obstacles in our lives we perceive as just that, obstacles, when really most of them come to be messengers to us, which is really the gift. So the relationship between alignment and burnout is being so acutely attuned to who you are that you first of all recognize when something is off. Okay, you recognize when it is off. When you recognize that it is off, then you begin to investigate. What are the symptoms that I'm having? What is happening to me? And in that sense, then we get messages. We're either getting them through mental stimulation or through physical stimulation, through spiritual stimulation, or all three, right? We're receiving messages. So it's trying to tell us something. It's coming to tell us something. And if we're paying attention, we'll get the message. It took me, Kate, as I journeyed through, I had my own course of burnout. It took me a couple of years actually to get the message. That's not good. That's not good. Because I was one that was reared to put my hand to the plow, put my head down and grind through obstacles. That's what you do. That's what productive people do. We don't fight about it. We don't argue about it. Whatever the task at hand is, that's what you pursue, right? And so I was wired to think a certain way, when in fact my mind and my body was screaming something else. I just took those as caution lights and not as red lights. And we need to know when we need to slow down to pay attention and investigate versus trying to plow through. And I think every message that we get from society is plow through. That's what you do. You plow through, right? We've gotten to a time around 2008 during the recession where human capital was being stretched really thin, right? To get the most out of fewer resources. And during that time, and I think perhaps even before then, certainly when I was in corporate America, your job wasn't only from 9 to 5. You had that, but then your cell phone was also on all the time. So, and heaven forbid you didn't answer your phone once it began to ring. You didn't know what was happening. You had to pay attention. So it was all of those stressors coming at one time. So the perception of being productive and being a good employee and getting the job done versus what was really going on in my body. I was misaligned. I just did not read it as being misaligned. It took me a couple of years. It actually took me a couple of visits to the hospital to kind of figure it out. So yeah. So, it can be pretty daunting, particularly when you've been socialized one way and you feel almost powerless again to control your outcomes. But, after a while, you can't deny what is going on. You have to really investigate.
And well, ultimately, it is up to you. The corporate world is not especially compassionate to what's going on with people, and it can often add an extra stress to the whole thing.
Absolutely. So we have corporate America being far more gratuitous now towards employees than we did, say, 10, 20 years ago, because every corporate entity has an agenda, right? And it has an agenda, and their agenda has to do with revenue. Oftentimes there are stakeholders and shareholders to whom one is indebted, and so they have to execute that agenda. So it has very little to do with you personally, although being in my field at the time, one would take those things pretty personally. So, my work ethic is one that whatever I put out needs to represent who I am. It needs to reach a certain standard of excellence, right? Because it represents me and I reflect the company. So it had to be at a certain standard. However, you and I both know if you and I kill over tomorrow, we will be replaced. but we weren't thinking that way. We weren't thinking that way. We were thinking, nope, we're trying to do good because that's what we've been trained to do. That's how we've been socialized to do. So no, I think corporate America is finally getting the message that we have to invest in our greatest assets, which is human capital. In order to maximize that, we have to treat people more humanely than we have in the past, and recognize that artificial intelligence is just that, and that is not human. And the two are very different. Yes. Yeah, it's very different.
Yes. So did your interest in relationships come from that experience, or is that how it developed, or?
Well, I've always been interested in relationships. It was just the realization that one affects the other. There is no relationship without psychology. We're not on this planet alone. No man is an island. So we're in constant relationship anyway. So it's just a matter of recognizing whether we are in a corporate relationship or a personal relationship, because one affects the other. Again, we can't have a relationship with our accountant or our banker without some modicum of psychology, right? Because it's all behavioral driven. It is all behavior driven. And so the degree to which you want me to return as a client or a customer, that may somewhat govern your behavior towards me. Otherwise you may not care, how that affects you. And so, thus you may not imbue a client or consumer out of that relationship. So we're in constant relationship. We weren't here to be alone. We're in constant relationship with one another. So we have to decide too, what we want that to look like, how we create that. But we have to first recognize that every relationship starts with us. So my relationship with my employer starts with me, not with the employer. So we oftentimes will relinquish control because we went to apply for a job that we think that someone validated us in giving it to us or awarding it to us. So in that, there's a an ounce of truth in that. However, it doesn't matter that they decided to employ you. You have to recognize that you are the asset, right? You are the talent. We are the talent. And in that is power. In that very thought is power, which means we want to execute with excellence, but we have to also show our value in every area, right? Why are we valued as a person? Why are we valued as an employee? Why are we valued? Why is our opinions important? How do we add or contribute to this process in a meaningful way? So when that is taken away, which is what happened to me during my corporate journey, I had a very successful run corporately, and then the industry as a whole began to change. It had nothing to do with me. It wasn't personal. Again, I began to take it very personally, but it had nothing to do with me. So anytime I endeavored a corporate position, I always wanted to be in a position where I could grow and learn, make a difference, and be compensated for my services. Be purposeful, grow and learn, and be compensated. And so when one of those things was missing, you began to, take inventory. And what began to happen is the job remained purposeful, but I was no longer growing and learning in a way that was productive. It then became less about our clients and more about the company. And because the way that I'm wired ethically, that just didn't work for me. Now I stayed longer. You've heard the saying, "Wear out your welcome." You can go and stay a little too long. I think that's what happened. I went and it felt a little good, so I stayed a little longer than I should have. I mean, I was very young, making, six figures and, traveling the world. Who wouldn't want that, and again, it was purposeful. But when the industry changed, the agenda changed to be more corporate centered than client centered. It triggered something in me. But I didn't think I was prepared to do anything about it. Here's what began to happen, if you would permit. Here's what began to happen, Kate. The longer I stayed in it, the more stress I imported into my body, and my body began talking to me. So I recall being 30 years old when you go and you get your whole baseline mammogram. I just moved to a new state. I was a newlywed. I didn't have any family or friends around, but nor did I have any cause for alarm in this very common thing that women do. You go get a baseline mammogram. So I beep up into my doctor's office and I'm excited. And once we get into the room and she began to do her examination, she began to ask, normal questions, any family history, when did you have your first period? Have you ever been pregnant? Just all of the common questions. But then she said to me, I would like to do more tests. And suddenly the room went silent. I thought, you test? What for? Why are we doing that? So she says, I'm not really sure what we're dealing with, so I'd like to do more tests. And this time it was test in the form of a needle aspiration. So she was actually going to physically intrude my body, with something to get cells to see what was going on. Thankfully, I was okay. But what I didn't know at that time was that just because she initiated that test, that catapulted me into what is considered a high-risk category, which meant instead of getting maybe a mammogram every 5 years until a certain age, I was now going to have mammograms and MRIs like every 6 months. And I went, I don't know about this. So imagine a 30-year-old all alone in a doctor's office, no one there. I have 4 sisters, all of my family's in a different state, receiving this news. And I'm going, what is going on? She asked me a question that seemed out of the ordinary, which was, have you been under a lot of stress lately? What has changed in your life? And I thought, how odd. How odd. So I was bringing in toxicity. So everything that I began to resent about my industry, I began to import into my body and began to hold it. And it had begun a destructive process. It was beginning to create toxicity within my body. I didn't know that. That's the importance of being in tune with your own alignment. And I didn't know. It took 3 other trips like that to get me to come to terms with, this is not for me. It is time for me to pivot, because every time I had to work with a superior, and it didn't matter who it was just a certain type of model in the industry that I had to adhere to. Anytime that came up, Kate, one of the signals from my universe at that time was the night before, I'd always dream of snakes. If there is one thing in the world that I'm absolutely afraid of, do not ever show me the snake. Just symbolically, we don't get along. I can do without them. They can do without me. We just don't need to meet ever. Ironically, before the encounter, it could be 6 months between those visits. It could be 8 months. It could be 6 weeks. It never failed. So I was fearful of indulging that process. And my body was letting me know, like, you can't keep doing this. So it was when I began to pay attention that things began to change. And it's interesting that it happens when we make a decision. When we finally make a decision is when the universe rises up to meet us, right, to help support that decision. So the time finally came that I needed to pivot out. For me, that was the answer. For people who are experiencing burnout, that may not always be the answer, but it was the answer for me. It was time for me to realize a lifelong dream of earning my doctorate. So I decided to go back to school. It would take about 5 to 6 years to complete that process, but I was up for it. I didn't want to be in that position again. I wanted to live what I thought was authentic and true for me moving forward. And once I made that decision, things began to change.
Yes.
So that the relationship between alignment and burnout is and anything else is a very authentic one. It's a strong bond, and it's one that we should not dismiss lightly.
Yes. So if somebody is, maybe not feeling good, thinking they might be experiencing burnout or what, what would some of the symptoms that they might experience be?
Oh yeah. So a few of the symptoms, the classic symptoms of burnout are emotional exhaustion, right? Just being tired, fed up emotionally. Depersonalization, where you are very where there's a type of causticness in your voice. There's as well as your behavior. You're not just feeling connected to anything. And then a decreased sense of self-efficacy. So your confidence is very, very low. But it doesn't matter how much sleep you get. It doesn't matter how the environment changes. It's never enough. It's never enough. A lot of people, oftentimes this goes unaddressed or undiagnosed because one would tend to use terms like, I'm just feeling depressed, or I'm feeling a bit anxious. So oftentimes the symptoms are confused with depression or anxiety, while, you know, there is no depressive medication that will help you with burnout, nor any kind of anxiolytic that will help you with burnout. Burnout, however, can lead down the road of depression. It can lead you to anxiety. There will be a lot of angst moments associated with burnout when one is in the throes. So that lethargy that's there, there isn't enough sleep in the world that will resolve that sense of ongoing just exhaustion that one is feeling when in the throes of burnout.
Okay.
It's something that you live with day in and day out.
Yes, yes.
You hate to get up in the morning. You know, it's the Sunday evening blues. You know, gosh, it's Monday morning, because you're going back to that place, right? You're going back to wherever that is, which is why the World Health Organization, you know, kind of placed it in the workplace. But when one comes home, if you're too exhausted to interact with your family because of what happened in the workplace, right? It's hard to draw those lines of demarcation because you're still feeling that way.
Yes, yes. Well, as you said, it can occur outside of the workplace, like caregivers experience it a lot. And even, you know, like a housewife can experience
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Because,
Teenagers.
yes. Or, yeah, teenagers who don't like school.
That's right.
They might.
Have you seen the amount of homework they have now? Yes. Absolutely.
This has been really interesting and I think valuable, because I think it is something that a lot of people experience. You experienced it, and I know I did at one time as well.
Yes.
And
yes.
So, but you can, you know, get through it and survive and come out the other side, and that's amazing. And
right. And the way you come out, so which is important, as I stated, for me, the answer was realizing my own truth, right? And in that realization, taking control and making a decision about what I wanted that to look like. In my in the little booklet, this little guide, I actually wrote for physicians. It's just a tiny guide because physicians, 71% of physicians are burned out before they complete their first year of residency. So you go, so where does that start, right? It has to have its origin somewhere in medical school or before that. So it just happens to culminate. So this thing is rampant. So for me, it was pivoting careers, doing something different, something that more aligned with my soul, with my authentic self. There are people who are not that fortunate, right? That cannot pivot out. So you go, well, what do? You know, how do I now get through this? And one thing that we know, and you know this from your training, that our brains play a key role in how we're feeling and in what we do. So we know that the brain will change. It can change physiologically by either how we focus, by focusing, or chemically, right? So it all depends on what we need to do. So mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, is a great tool that that will change our brain over time to help us to better align what we're feeling, what we want, and what we will then manifest into the world, right? So we want to make sure that we begin to employ all of our resources, and the biggest one being our brain. You know, I created, actually through the book, an acronym for accessing the brain, and it's real simple. It's EASY, EASY, easy. And what we want to do with that is initially just empty our minds and breathe deeply. Empty the mind, breathe deeply, inhale, hold 10 seconds, and exhale. Okay. E for emptying the mind. A, to access your higher self. So once you breathe deeply, that will allow you access to your higher brain. Because anytime that we begin to ponder and we're feeling stuck, we're in the lower parts of our brain because it's all about survival. We're just trying to survive. And so we're fighting. We're kind of stuck right there, but we need access to our thinking brain. And that allows us to be stimulated, to stimulate. So EAS, stimulate, get to the higher part of our brain so that we can plan accordingly. What are we going to do? It's in that moment that we grab our power back, that we regain control. And once we gain control, we have the why. You began to advance. You advance, right? So that's what we wanted. So easy. So easy.
Or you
easy.
become
Yes.
you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we want to live in as much as we can more aligned with our authentic selves. When there are certain things that we can't quite get around, right? So if we're in the throes of a career and now is not the optimal time to leave that career, we began to host conversations with our superiors about either modifications in our current role or to be assigned to a special project and something that brings us more joy, something that more aligns with who we are. Because it's in those moments that we begin to grab pieces of us that hopefully will meld into the whole very soon. But we have to regain control. And that's what this gift is beckoning us to do, to take back control, to take our power, and to then walk a more authentic path.
Yes, and I love that acronym. Yes. It's great.
Easy.
So that we're almost at the end of our time. So I want to ask you one last question, and that is, if you could have the listeners take away one thought from the show today, what would you want that to be?
The one thought is that as dark as it may seem, as grim as it may seem, you always have control. Always look for control. So whenever you're feeling stuck, right, that says that you lack control. Always ask a situation. Put all the pieces on the table. Look at them and ask the situation. What have you come to teach me? What have you come to teach me? That is a position of opening ourselves up and listening and moving forward, as opposed to what am I supposed to do next? That is very elusive and it's out there. It's out there somewhere, right? But when we ask, what have you come to teach me? Then that brings it back to us and help us to regain our locus of control. We begin to listen. So there's no need to be stuck. What have you come to teach me? Look at the pieces and comprehensively take in the messages. Oh, okay, I'm supposed to be quiet, or I'm supposed to move, or I need to create more. So you'll get the message. What have you come to teach me?
Great. That's great advice, really.
Well, great. It's been so good being with you today.
Yes. Can you tell the listeners how they can contact you before we go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they can always log into my website, www.drfaithbrown.com, or they can give me a call at 212-729-5653. Email me at drfaithbrown@gmail.com. I welcome your viewers to give me a call, to send me an email. Let me know how they're feeling, if they're in the corporate sector or in the healthcare sector and experiencing burnout. This is something that we need to talk about and we need to do something about. So I'd love to hear from them. I welcome their calls.
Okay. And if you forget any of that, you can go to the radio website. That's soulfireradio.com. Click on guests and scroll down to Dr. Brown's photo, and the contact information is listed there.
Wonderful.
So thank you for being here today and talking about this subject.
Yes.
And thank you to the listeners. I hope that you gained some new information, and we have a great show planned for next week. I'll be talking with, let me see, next week is the 19th, isn't it? Okay.
I think Wednesday is the 18th and Thursday is the 19th, yes.
Yes, okay. So I'll be talking with Gail Picken, and we'll be talking about life adventures. So I'm really excited about that show because, you know, who doesn't like life adventures? And
Right.
that is Gail's passion. So I'm expecting that to be a very exciting show.
Yeah, I'll be tuning in.
Okay, great. And so I'm just going to say goodbye. We did go a little over our time, but I think that we had some important details to learn there. So
Thank you very much and happy holidays, Kate.
yes, happy holidays to you.
Thank
And we'll see you next week, 1 p.m. on Thursday.
Thank you for listening to Soul Fire Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brightened your day, or sparked a new thought, we have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to Soul Fire Wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.